Hey man, I heard that Destiny 2 might be coming out with a Battlegrounds. Oh man, that's cool, but you know what? I heard Nintendo was coming out with Battlegrounds, baby. That's Super Smash Bros. Battlegrounds, SBBG, and I'm gonna be playing Yoshi and going ba-dink on anybody who tries to step to me. Yo, and they also got this like Pikmin Battleground. I'm honestly not too sure how that's gonna play out, but you know, I'll try it. Dragon Ball Z, Super Smash Bros, Destiny 2, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, any game might add a Battlegrounds mode at this point, but that doesn't matter. Who cares? It's a fun mode. People enjoy it right now and like to see their favorite characters from different universes battling it out. So what's the difference? What do they need in order to succeed in this market that potentially could be overflooded in the near future? Well, let's break it down and talk about the 4 things that each Battlegrounds game needs in order to succeed. These are 4 aspects of the game that need to be done well in order for the game to succeed. Number 1 is pacing. Pacing is extremely important in Battlegrounds modes. Being able to drop in from the bus, the plane, or even the Zeppelin and find yourself going down into the action immediately is important for a player who just wants that adrenaline rush and wants to try and get into the thick of things right away. But you also need to support players who want to play something more of a strategic game where they want to not get in that early fight and maybe go away from all the other players, try to loot up and find an experience that brings them back into the fight once they've gathered some gear and feel a lot more comfortable. So that pacing has manifested itself in the fog, the thing that gets closer and closer and drives players towards each other so that engagements continue to happen. It's a timer all the players must abide by, otherwise heed the consequences, and those consequences are often deadly. PUBG and Fortnite have done a decent job of this, and I've played both games for quite a while, ever since they've been out, and of course I think that they do a good job of pacing in general. There are those moments where you feel like nothing is happening in some of those games, and that's okay, but I think obviously they've gotten it right enough to where people do feel the majority of the time they play that enough happens for them to keep coming back. In the Paladins Battlegrounds, the footage that you're seeing underneath this audio track, I'm actually very interested as to how this pacing will apply because it's a huge map, and of course you have mounts, so the mounts change the way you can traverse across the map, so the fog isn't necessarily as big of a detriment to you, especially since you can just mount up and get right out of it in the current iteration. So I'm curious how that either adds to more engagements or it lessens engagements if teams want to play a little bit more of a campy style to the end. We all know that engagements are the most important thing in Battlegrounds modes, which is why the number 2 thing that each Battleground that wants to be successful needs to have is a good combat feel. Now, when mentioning the top players in the Battleground scene, of course PUBG and Fortnite, it's interesting to think about how those games came to be. From my understanding, PUBG was created as its own game. Obviously, I think the head of PUBG had worked on other Battle Royale games and had taken his leadership and his awarenesses and experiences to create PUBG, but of course they had to create that whole new feel of combat from the beginning. Fortnite was a game that Epic Studios was actually using as kind of like a base building game, fight against PvE, and they added that Battlegrounds mode later. The 2 differences about that though is that one combat feel had to be created from the ground up and one was already a combat feel and then had to be adjusted. It was already kind of got its roots and then it had to be adjusted for the Battlegrounds mode as people started to give feedback like this bullet drop is too much or I don't like the random spray on some of these weapons. What's interesting about Paladins Battlegrounds and how this will add to the conversation is that unlike Fortnite, which is a PvE experience primarily, and unlike PUBG that created that combat feel after basically for a brand new game, Paladins has an established kind of foothold in the hero FPS genre, and that's what's I think is interesting is they're just translating already a competitive combat feel that feels good into a Battlegrounds game. And so I think it's going to be a little easier, and having played it, the combat feels just as good or better in Paladins, and it makes you kind of crave it because you're like, oh my god, this is that same Paladins kind of rush and fun that I'm used to, and now I just can't wait to get into an engagement. Now, I don't think this matters too much because it can always be iterated on. I mean, PUBG and Fortnite have all made drastic changes to their weapons over the course of many patches, and Paladins has as well. So I think no game is kind of stuck in, oh, this isn't the right feel, and thus it won't get there in the future. I think it can always improve, but I think Paladins Battlegrounds has got that immediate appeal because Paladins has already had that established foothold in having a good combat feel in an FPS competitive environment, and I think that's something that's pretty interesting about it and why it's probably something a lot of people are looking forward to. For the record, I think all 3 games have got it right in terms of this feel, but I think it's important that if any new game tries to come out, whether it be Dragon Ball Z, whether it be Nintendo, that combat feel, just actually playing against somebody, those engagements, it has to be spot on. Otherwise, there's really nothing to look forward to. If you don't enjoy that core experience experience, then it doesn't matter how good you look, what the take is, the style or the pacing, it's not going to sustain in my opinion. But I'm open to being wrong. I mean, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And now the third thing that every Battlegrounds mode needs in order to be successful, and that is to get the loot and the progression right.
Excuse me, Raynday, what is the difference between progression and pacing? I feel like they're very similar and slightly overlapping as far as talking points.
Well, that's a good question. Pacing is really the amount of time it takes you to get into engagements and to get to the final circle. That's pretty much the most important thing. How long does a game take, and what are you doing throughout that game? Looting and progression kind of go hand in hand and are different because it's not just progression, it's your sense of progression, and that's what looting provides. Essentially, think about this. Are you growing stronger, and how are you growing stronger, and does that system make you feel good or bad? Have I gone through 18 houses and literally found nothing? Am I still missing a helmet after, 20 minutes of gameplay? Have I taken down 4 or 5 people and they've had absolutely nothing? These are questions that, if aren't answered in the right way, can throw a player off the experience. There needs to be this sense of value for accomplishing things, whether time spent in-game looking for items and getting at least enough of a return so you feel good about what you've done, or after accomplishing like taking down a full squad, being able to get something from that and be able to be better now as a result heading into the later parts of the game. A good looting and progression system, I think, allows you to build up and through the Battlegrounds be able to take things from different players and find certain things, of course, that overall improve your ability to win in the future. So those who engage quicker, who engage more often, and who loot more should have an advantage because of those actions in being able to win the final engagement if they are alive to do so. A lot of people don't like progression, and honestly they feel, I think in this kind of climate, that progression is almost like this unfair thing. But what's interesting about Battlegrounds is that progression has been the status quo for every single Battlegrounds game, and people love it. People want to be better at the end of the game because they have that tier 3 armor, or they've got that legendary gun, or they've got those legendary items in the case of Paladins Battlegrounds. You want that progression. It's something people seek for, they play for, and it's interesting how it's been able to kind of circumvent the climate of progression is bad throughout a lot of gamers' minds, yet still find a foothold, a serious foothold in the Battlegrounds genre. Another thing about progression is that it's really your story. This is what viewers and of course players can attach themselves to. It's almost like that memento of what you've done. I went into these 5 houses and I found this great item in my first 5 houses. That's part of that story. Wow, I got lucky this game. And then you take down an early kind of regime coming towards you, a squad of 4 players, let's say, like that, the evil regime, and then you're able to take some of their loot, and that's that story. Oh, I got this huge item that allows me to be so much more impactful later on in the match because of how well I did in that first engagement, and that allows you to kind of have this tale as you go in, and of course that big build up after I've gotten all this loot, taken all these things down, searched all these houses, and it comes down to the wire, who's gonna be the one to win. If there was no sense of progression, I think Battlegrounds games would not sustain the way that they have in terms of million-plus CCU for Fortnite and PUBG so consistently, and so I think this is a very important aspect of a good Battlegrounds mode. Plus, it's also that I might get lucky card, right? It's that thought process in the back of your mind that's like, maybe I'll go into the first house this time and get something that's so good that now I have a really, really strong chance to win, and it's something that I think people really look forward to, whether they admit it or not. In the back of their mind, they're hoping that they're the ones who can go in first house and get that legendary something and be better than other people. Now on to the fourth and final reason as to what makes a Battlegrounds game successful. It's having something unique that you're adding to the genre. A famous book trilogy about a girl fighting against the odds in a sci-fi fantasy universe with a love interest and a corrupt system against her? What am I talking about? Divergent? The Hunger Games? I'm sure there's even more out there. But of course, the idea is that similar themes are taken throughout all types of media, books, movies, and of course video games. It's just the way that entertainment works, because it's not the creators that drive what is popular, it's the consumption that drives what's popular. Something works, and a lot of people try to say, I want to work this too, but I want to put my spin on it. We cannot create original ideas anymore. There's almost nothing that's never been done before, and if you think it hasn't, it's probably been done by somebody 1,000 years ago, but they probably just didn't write it down. So the question isn't about do new contenders in any genre deserve to exist. They do. do. The question is, what do they do differently that will allow them to succeed? And that is always the crux of the question for me. So for me, it's what do you bring differently? I love Fortnite and the differences between that and PUBG, because Fortnite brought the building aspect, it brought the cartoony vibe, it brought a little bit faster pacing to it, and I think a lot of people like that. And as you can tell, with million plus ECU, it's doing well for itself. Of course, Paladins Battlegrounds, I think a lot of people are intrigued by that because it's the first kind of hero champion FPS that is going to bring abilities into it, and also I think different pacing as well with mounts, and you have items and things like that. I think this is going to be a very, very cool year for the genre in general, because if every company that decides to get into this and add a Battleground system is able to iterate and change even just one thing to make it their own, I'm going to play it. I'm going to check it out. I'm going to try it, because different strokes for different folks. I may love one thing, but find out that I absolutely adore another thing, or maybe that this thing isn't my cup of tea. I mean, and unlike cell phone carriers where you have Verizon and AT&T basically dominating America, where T-Mobile and Sprint are trying to keep up and then don't even start talking to me about Cricket Wireless. I mean, I don't even know how those guys are in business. But the idea is that, of course, those two behemoths at the top make it very difficult for everyone else to compete, and you kind of have to just do what those two want, right? You kind of got to just pay what they ask you for, and that's obviously not a good thing from a consumer standpoint. And one of the things that I'm excited about is that hopefully this battle royale genre, and of course the Battlegrounds modes, if they become bigger and bigger and more players enter into the space, it breeds better competition, it breeds better development practices, and it keeps everyone at their A game, so that we as consumers get the best product available, and everyone is working hard to make their product even better, because they can't sit on their laurels and just expect everyone to only come to them. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Kind of a longer video, but an exciting one, and I think a really cool kind of look at what makes Battlegrounds mode successful. If I missed something, let me know in the comment section below. If you agree or disagree, also feel free to tell me. And I do work for Hi-Rez Studios. If for some reason that invalidates every single thing I've said to you guys, feel free. I know some people have mentioned that in the comments and said, I can't take anything you say seriously. Even that part about you waking up and eating oatmeal for breakfast, that could have been a lie for Hi-Rez's benefit. If you have to go that far, please do. I just want to let you guys know that I do work in the industry as well as run a YouTube channel as of a year and a half ago. So take whatever you need to take with a grain of salt, but also understand that I'm here just trying to make good content that inspires conversation, intrigues people, and hopefully allows us all to take a deeper look into the genre that's been really popular here in 2017 and moving on into 2018. And I will tell you, I would much rather be in the industry and have that perspective as well as a consumer perspective versus not be in the industry and just be trying to make stuff up about what's going on in the company's point of view. I mean, I think it's so intriguing actually being able to have both perspectives. But that's just me. I mean, I am me, so, you know, I am a little biased about myself, I will say that. So keep it locked. I've been doing a lot of Battlegrounds content lately, so feel free to check those other videos out, probably on the end screen right now in front of you. And as always, my friends, remember to never give up, never stop gaming, and I'll see you all next time.